Google Cloud Digital Leader Certification was introduced in 2021. However, it is now among the most popular Google Cloud certifications. Why is this certification so popular? Program analysts, business analysts, testers, and even sometimes architects are among the roles of people attempting this certification. What makes this certification the best place to start learning Google Cloud? And learners take somewhere between 1 to 4 weeks on average to clear this certification. What is the step-by-step approach that somebody can take when they start preparing for this certification? And more importantly, this certification also has been updated a lot very recently. What has changed with respect to this certification? To have this discussion, we have Sathish Vijay from Awesome GCP. We have Amit, and we are missing GK in here. Hopefully, we would probably have him a little later in the discussion. Satish, Amit, glad to have you here.
My
Nice to be
pleasure.
here, Ranga.
Amit will be moderating the discussion for us. Over to you, Amit.
Thank you, Ranga. So yes, today we'll start off with the first certification that is there in the Google Cloud Learning path, right? So anybody who wants to kind of get started in learning journey of Google Cloud typically would kind of choose doing this certification, uh, probably from my experience that I've spoken with learners. So I think we would like to know, like, who should do this cloud digital leader certification. I know it has a nice kind of ring to it. It has the leader kind of word in it, so it kind of entices a lot of people to kind of have this in their bucket list. So wanted to know from you, Satish, who should do, is just the leaders or anyone and everyone can do the certification?
So the Cloud Digital Leader certification is typically aimed for people who are not coming from a core technical background. Okay? I'm currently doing a bunch of training sessions for Google, actually for Google's partners, right? Via Google, I'm doing for Google's partners. And the typical attendees for these sessions tend to be people from sales, pre-sales, maybe a VP of engineering, maybe in a smaller company, a CTO or a CEO, anybody who is going to be interacting or interfacing with a customer, right? Maybe a project lead, maybe a project manager. So those who necessarily don't have to necessarily get into the implementation, but who still need to have enough of an understanding of the Google Cloud technologies to be able to effectively carry out that business, right? Anybody in that kind of role would be suitable for the cloud digital leader. For technical people, I think it would be a nice feather in the cap to also have a cloud digital leader certification. But I think once you have something like a professional architect or associate cloud engineer, one of the other specializations, it's less of a requirement. Like Amit said, it has got a nice enticing ring to it when you say you're a cloud digital leader. So maybe as a feather in the cap, it would be nice. But I think it's very important for somebody who's coming either from a non-technical background or who's moving in sideways from some other kind of technology or some other kind of domain. So just to say, why are we doing this, right? Why are we getting into cloud? And within why are we getting into cloud? Why are we getting into Google Cloud? So to get to yourself some exposure in that area, it would be good to study for this exam and then pass that.
Absolutely. And if you look at Azure, if you look at other cloud platforms, right? Azure has Azure Fundamentals, and like AWS has AWS Cloud Practitioner. So those are the entry-level certifications which non-technical folks can get started with, or somebody who's actually starting with the cloud. So let's say I'm a programmer, I don't have any experience with the cloud at all, and I want to understand what cloud brings in. So even those kind of situations, I think these starter certifications have a lot of value. Going a year back, Google Cloud did not have anything as an entry point, right? So the entry point was cloud engineer, which was like really, really technical. So I feel like this one is kind of an intermediate step. So if you like Satish is saying, I think if you are like somebody who's going to do a leadership role or somebody who's non-technical, this is a great start. And also for people probably who are technical but who don't know what the cloud is at all and they have not played with cloud at all before, this might be a good starting point as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I think I would say this cloud digital leader to add on to what both Satish and Ranga you have said, I think the Cloud Digital Reader is one of its kind of certification. It is a very unique certification, which I don't think other cloud providers offer, right? I can easily compare like associate cloud engineer certification with like AZ 900 or AWS's cloud practitioner. These certifications are at like one level where they are kind of focused at the developers, um, or what techies like want to be techies kind of entering their cloud journeys. But digital leader is actually specifically targeted at one particular segment of an enterprises who are the kind of leaders or slash decision makers, I would say, where you want
Amit,
to add
actually, I
something.
won't. Actually, I won't agree with that because I
Okay.
feel like as far as difficulty level goes, the earlier version of the Cloud Digital Leader was
Yeah.
even tougher than AZ 900 and Cloud Practitioner. Probably the newer version of Cloud Digital Leader might be what you are talking about, but at least the older version was actually technically almost like I felt it was like a pre-architect level certification. So you had to have a lot of
Yes.
technology, in-depth, like little bit of understanding of technology to be able to do that. But you don't need that kind of technology knowledge if you want to do AZ 900, for example, or if you want to do a cloud practitioner. So
Oh,
like earlier version was little different, but probably the new version, which we'll be talking about a little later, maybe something which, as you are describing, like might be a one which is focused on leaders and probably on the transformation journey.
yes, yes, absolutely. So Google certification definitely, I think they are a notch kind of harder compared to its counterparts at the same level. But yeah, the new one definitely is more focused on the decision makers and kind of helping them in terms of embarking and onboarding on the Google Cloud journey and trying to make that decision on why Google Cloud suits their enterprises. So now, talking about that, like, why should someone learn that Cloud Digital Leader certification? If you want to add onto it, Satish.
Why should they attempt the cloud digital leader?
Yeah, yeah,
As with all certifications, right? My goal with these certifications has always been to say, how do you perform better at your job, right? So, for example, I think I just mentioned before this call, right? I took the LookML certification earlier this week. Why? Because I can see that is an essential part of the data pipeline, and since I want to work in data engineering, I want to spend a little more time learning that, right? So, for any person who wants to contribute to a project, to any kind of company that is working on Google Cloud, it forces you again in a direction that says, pick up some understanding about why this needs to be done, and when this needs to be done, which particular products do you need to choose, right? So in many cases what you will see is, as leaders, and when I say leaders, right, it's basically about providing guidance. When you say leaders, is not necessarily your CEO of the company, CTO of the company, right?
yeah.
You're a leader even if you're leading any kind of group of people onto something else. So when you're leading a customer from wherever they are, on premise or independent systems, and then leading them onto the cloud, you need to have an understanding of why this is necessary, why this is important, and of course then the question of how do you do it, right? And for that there are other technical things. And therefore it becomes important, right? It's not necessary about throwing technology at them and saying, what, here it is, go do whatever you want. You have to be able to kind of convince them that this is useful, that the return on investment is higher, you are able to grow as a company, you are able to do better things faster. And for that knowledge, right, preparing for something like the Cloud Digital Leader would be very effective, right? So I would strongly support that people do that. I think I mentioned in the previous question that I've been doing a whole bunch of sessions on behalf of Google for Google's partners. And almost at the end of most of these sessions, which are in and around sales, pre-sales, and a lot of high-level technology stuff, I've encouraged people to take the Cloud Digital Leader certification. So it's not something that I'm just saying randomly without proof. I've actually been doing this in the conversations I've been having with Google's partners. And I find it is effective, right? For their learning, for their understanding, and to take the best decisions for their customer and to guide them in the best way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, practice what you preach, right? So if you are going to preach someone to kind of work in Google Cloud, and it's basically practicing and getting yourself familiar with all the services that Google Cloud offers. Anything, Ranga, that you would want to add on in terms of why should someone learn this? In
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at last decade or so, right, cloud is one of the things which is transformational, right? Social, mobile, analytics, and the cloud, as we call SMAC, and these are helping enterprises transform, right? So those are the things, those are the most important parts. And among these three, I think cloud is the one which gives a lot of opportunities, like especially like it kind of makes the entire like it makes it a level playing field, right? Earlier, large enterprises had big advantages, right? I mean, like setting up a data center, for example, if a startup wanted to go global, it was very, very difficult. But now, like they can scale as they need, they can go global, and therefore it's kind of becoming a much more level playing field. And therefore, a lot of businesses have to adapt, right? I mean, all the large enterprises cannot, they don't have the scale advantage anymore. So it's very, very essential that like the entire leadership team in big enterprises understands the cloud and the opportunities that are offered by the cloud. I think that's another space where they can try and do the certification to understand what the cloud is, what are the like opportunities that are available, and how they can transform businesses and make use of the things which are present in the cloud.
Absolutely. Well put that. So now with this clear, so we who should basically learn and why should someone learn this in starting their cloud journey. Let's kind of dive deep into what are the learning areas that is involved in this cloud digital leader certification. Satish.
Not very much actually. Now, especially since we are at the cusp of a change between the earlier exam guide and the new one.
Yeah.
Um, I'm I'm not entirely sure, honestly, what's the right way to answer the question. For the previous set of questions that were there, which we really don't need to talk about, but just to give a context, it was very similar to what was the professional cloud architect exam, right? There were a lot of questions, still kind of abstract, but still aligned quite closely to what the professional cloud architect was. What it is changing now is to a general why cloud, and
Hmm.
it's a very high level view of what is going to be offered within the cloud,
Yeah.
and even within product choices. At least in looking at the sample questions, right? There are just fewer questions about core Google Cloud, right? And even there, it was about product choices, right? Given that somebody wants to use a database, which of these four databases would be useful? I think there was a question about, again, these are all in the sample questions, so I'm not revealing any actual questions. There was some question about distinguishing between structured data and unstructured data, right?
Yes.
And this is something that is extremely well known for anybody in technology. But for a person coming in at a slightly higher level, right? So I'm looking at people in sales, pre-sales,
Yeah.
those kind of things. A project manager who's not necessarily technically strong, but who needs to still manage the project, right? That's the kind of stuff that you'll have to generally learn about. Now, the new exam guide somehow hasn't been very clear for me, right? Because the exam guide itself is fairly abstract, and it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what you would need to do. In fact, I don't even know if there is a corresponding book or a corresponding course I can go tell people, go read this. So I'm yet to discover really what is the, what are the key topics that they should be learning. But in general, it looks to be more high level, and yet cover, even at a fairly high level, all the products that are there within Google Cloud. Yeah.
Right. So basically, I think we still don't have a very concise answer for this question. What I understand, learning areas at this stage is pretty vague and spread across, and we don't have any kind of book or course yet available which kind of outlines the learning areas for us in details.
Yeah,
Ranga,
just to add on to it,
yes,
Amit. See, like the fundamentals are still the same, right? I mean, if you look at how do you choose compute, how do you choose storage, how
Yes.
do you choose databases, those are still the same. However,
Yes.
I would say how the questions are organized are is change. I mean, how the questions are asked is changing, and also the questions are one level high, as Satish was saying, right? So it's earlier the question might be, okay, this is the situation. How do you choose the compute?
Yeah.
Now it's a higher level question, more focused on, okay, a business is transforming, doing a digital transformation, okay, and then okay, like, and they're probably modernizing they've already modernized the infrastructure.
Yeah.
What's the next step, right? Probably they will need to start modernizing their applications, choose like containers or serverless. So it's more like, rather than just focusing on the details, I think there is a level where they're going one level up and also focusing on the transformation journey, rather than just focus on the Google Cloud products themselves. They're starting to focus on the transformation. Let's say there's an existing enterprise which
Yeah.
already has a on-premise setup. I think it's now shifting to that. So how does a business which has an on-premise setup kinds of
Yes.
transform itself onto the cloud? So how do they start with infrastructure? I mean, the first step might be to make use of just the infrastructure from the cloud, and
Yes.
maybe the next step is to modernize applications, and after that would be probably look at making use of building APIs, kind of do business platform, kind of. So I think the exam is more shifting from the Google Cloud specific products and things, but to a generalized kind of a thing. I think a similar shift is in like, if you look at the architect certification, I would say among all the architect certifications out there, Azure, Google Cloud, and AWS, I feel like Google Cloud architect certification is the one which also focuses on the generic architecture skills. It's not just the knowledge of the Google Cloud products that is important, but also generic architecture skills. And I
Yes.
feel that is something which is happening with this certification as well. So they are, instead of just focusing on the Google Cloud products, it's more like, okay, let's equip people with knowledge about general, what is the cloud, what is the value, how do you transform, and then probably also like ask a few things about specific to Google Cloud.
Right.
Let me
So,
just, second
yeah.
what he said. Something that I missed saying. I think the word transformation is very critical here, right? I think that the what Ranga mentioned, and that's what just set off a thought in my mind. Essentially, I think that is the key part of all of this, right? As companies move over to Google Cloud or to the cloud in general, how should they approach it, right? How should they project the value? And in that context, since you started off asking what kind of topics they should study, there are a few things like maybe even frameworks about transformation that would be very useful. There would be things about migrating that would be very useful. In fact, I think there is a book sponsored by Google, um, somewhat to the tune of maybe something like migrating to Google Cloud or something. It's a free book. You can actually find it online. I think it's about 100 and something pages, right? So I think those kind of topics would be more relevant now for the new exam. At the
Right.
same time, you should keep maybe about 20-25% of what used to be the professional cloud architect exam, right? So the
Mhm.
earlier version of CDL might have been 70-75% of the PCA exam. Now I think
Right.
it might be about 20-30%, where we have to still make decisions about Google products and solutions. Yeah.
Right. Well, while you both were speaking and sharing your views, I think two very radical questions came to my mind. I would like
Yeah.
to ask you. I'm
Yeah.
not sure it makes sense, but yeah, since both of you said that this is a very, very generic certification, so does it make sense for any new learner, irrespective of the cloud they are coming from, to first take this certification because it is very generic and agnostic to any particular cloud? And my second question is, because there is no defined kind of learning or course available yet or released by Google, do you think it makes more sense now for anyone who wants to do this certification to do the associate cloud engineer first and then come to the cloud digital leader? I'm just a radical approach here. Apologies if I've asked something really absurd.
Actually, Google does have courses in and around, what is suitable for this kind of exam. I think on Coursera and Pluralsight, it's the same courses, of course, the Google engineers put out. I
Right.
have seen courses titled Business Transformation of Google Cloud, Migrating with Google Cloud. So these are relevant for this exam, right? So these courses are definitely relevant for this exam. And as I said, Google has also sponsored a 100+ page book on learning for the Cloud Digital Leader exam. So I think there is enough content. I think there is enough of a learning path, and there is also, and I know this because for on behalf of Google, I have conducted some of these training sessions for Google's partners, and the large number of people who are also certifying themselves on the Cloud Digital Leader via some of the sessions I'm doing on behalf of Google. So there's definitely training, there's content, there is learning information, there's on-demand content, there's instructor-led content, and there is enough, I think, to go ahead on this. The reason why I think both Ranga and me have given slightly non-specific answers is because we're just at that change, right? The new exam came out January 26th, and neither Ranga nor me have been allowed to take the exam, which is something we should talk about soon anyway. So we don't have very clear specifics, right? I think we have a general understanding this is what it is, but unless we actually do the exam, I might not at least be able to give very clear direction to others, saying this is exactly what you should do. But I think the material is there. And in fact, when I tried to book this exam, I didn't even study for the exam. I just knew I knew it, right? I was just going to go wing it and hope I pass.
Yeah.
On the first, sorry, Amit, go ahead.
No, go ahead,
Sorry,
Satish. I think please go ahead. I thought.
Yeah, there are two questions. So just responding to the first question also, I think it's a nice to have again to the have the Cloud Digital Leader. You don't necessarily need to do the Cloud Digital Leader if you're already technically deep, right? It is not the expectation from you. It is like saying, what, you've come from a deep technical background, but still, do you need to take a high level certification? Not required at all, right? So it's not important, and it would ideally be useful only for people who are coming in from a non-technical background, right? And but if you want an extra feather in your cap, or if you're people like Ranga or me who are trying to educate more people, get more people involved in a Google Cloud, then of course we need to do it irrespective of whether we have other deeper certifications. I mean, other specialist certifications. But in general, don't bother about it too much. But at the same time, if you're already technically quite deep, and if you want to also get an idea of what does a customer, how do we talk to the customer, what is important for them, what is relevant for them, I think it's a nice to have, right? So it's not going to be too tough for you, and you should attempt it, but not necessary.
Right.
Cool. Yeah, just to add on to Satish's thing, right? I'll take the first one, right? AZ, like which certification to start with. I think AZ 900 is still the easiest one. Like after looking at what the I mean, this is just based on the assessment of whatever practice test Google Cloud put on for the CDL. I've not done the new CDL yet. So obviously, I'm not allowed to do that as well. So there is no way we would be able to know exactly how tough the exam is. But I think just based on the assessment of the practice test and reading the exam objectives, I think AZ 900 is still the easiest way. If somebody wants to take the first step into cloud, and if certification is what they want to tell that they have started with the cloud, then probably I would say AZ 900 or CDL. I think these two would be the easiest options to start with, right? I mean, and second thing is like about the course material and things like that. I think fundamentally nothing has changed about the certification. The knowledge you need to have is exactly the same. However, it's more at an abstract level. Earlier, the questions were concrete. Now, I would say the questions are more abstract, and it's more about getting that abstract thing into the course, right? For example, like I have a course on Cloud Digital Leader. Sathish has a practice test on it as well. So it's like the changes, like when I think about what are the changes I would need to make to that course to make it relevant to the new exam, I'm not thinking of any structural changes. It's more like probably have a discussion about digital transformation, explain what is infrastructure modernization, like just maybe a half an hour content edition to just explain at a high level. Like usually we go to be deep. This is like where you just need to go one step higher and kind of think not just what is Google Cloud, but also think about, okay, how do businesses transform to Google Cloud? So it would not be a big change, I would think. Like the content is out there. It's just like how the questions are asked, how you put the content out.
Right. So that will be a bit challenging to kind of update the courses if you don't get an opportunity to take the test. Oh my God. So In terms of just the course outline, you want to share like key highlights? What's new in this? Once you said is digital transformation. Uh, those kind of things are new. Anything else that you want to add?
Yeah,
I
I
think,
think
Ranga, this is entirely your question, because I don't have a course per se on it, right? But I do agree with one thing, which is what I wanted to say, right? For course creators, it's so difficult keeping up with the changes in the cloud, right? I don't know how people like Ranga and all. I definitely don't have that much time. I'm struggling to do all the things that I want to do, need to get done, and I've got
yeah,
so many ideas. And on top of this, when things like this change so often, it's just
yeah,
difficult to keep up, right? And I
absolutely.
put out, like you said, I've got a set of practice tests for the Cloud Digital Leader on Udemy. And I did that because there were no good practice tests at that time, right? Nobody else had a practice test. And now I'm thinking, I need to go and change all of that to make it relevant. And the
Absolutely.
amount
Yeah,
of time it takes to do that is significant, right? It's significant.
absolutely.
And I also want to do the awesome GCP videos. Again, the lack of time is really um, it's tough on course creators like Ranga, right? I've done just one
Absolutely.
and I'm struggling with that. And,
Mm.
but it's important. Anyway, over to you to answer the real question, Ranga. Go ahead.
No, I think like just to talk about the point you're bringing up, right, Satish? I mean, like whenever I create a course, I don't focus on the certification. Like certification, like as for me, is just a paper, right? I mean, so for me, like when we create a course, it's about what knowledge somebody needs to have at the end with respect to Google Cloud. That's what is like the most important part. And once I focus on that, I feel certification becomes a result. Like it's not the end objective. Like it's not like we build a course where everything is section. I mean, you'd see a lot of courses out there which have the same section by section as what the exam objectives are. When I build a course, I don't do that. I just, like, for example, I have a printout of the exam objectives like this. For example, I have in my hands. So I kind of try and understand what they want. What does Google Cloud want by printing these exam objectives, right? So what do they want learners to know at the end of it? Right, that's the thing which I focus on. I mean, I even don't care about the exam questions 90% of the time. So when I'm actually focusing on the course, it's more about, okay, what knowledge should somebody know at the end of it? That's what is the focus. And once they have the right knowledge, they'll be able to do the exam anyway, right? So I do, like, I kind of separate the course from the exam. And the exam, clearing the exam, is just a result of knowing everything. And even if they probably ask different questions, 90% of the learners of the course would be able to answer them. So yeah, that's the perspective I take, exactly because of this, right? So the certification objectives can change drastically, right? If you look at Azure's journey, I mean, Google Cloud is pretty stable. If you look at Azure, I mean, the changes are much faster. I mean, they kind of combine certifications, split certifications, and then if you actually create courses which are aligned to the certifications directly, it becomes very, very difficult to maintain that over a period of time. So yeah, so it's more like just keep myself neutral from the certification, focus on what needs to be learned, and then like the certification becomes a result.
No, very valid point there, Ranga, from your side. Um, so now, I think, as you said, it's been very tricky for learners to the course outline is there, but there is no proper course, and everything is kind of distributedly lying here and there. As you said, there's one kind of 100-page book which Google has, which we can go through. So if I'm preparing today for this certification, what should be my strategy to start learning Google Cloud? Is it like, okay, take that book, read that 100-page, have the course outline in front of me, and then search for this topic in the Google Cloud documentation and see what reference material I get and go through everything that's available for each of the bullet points mentioned in the exams outline? Or what is your recommendation, Satish?
Uh, I actually don't have a very good answer for that, right? The general idea is to get a good knowledge of the cloud, but the problem is I am not in a good position to answer that because I already have all this. I mean, not all this, right? Some knowledge, and um, I'm finding it a little difficult to. There is this concept called the curse of knowledge, right? Because you already know it, it's difficult to put yourself in the position of somebody who's not got all of that. And I'm thinking, what's the best way for somebody completely new? Um, if I had to take a guess, right, I would say the original, I mean, the core courses that are available from the Google Cloud team on Coursera and Pluralsight titled this, right? Business Transformation Google Cloud, Migrating to Google Cloud. That might be the starting point, right? Almost any other course, for example, when you say computer architecture or any of these other ones on Google Cloud, that is, it might delve a little too much into the details, right? And I'm presuming that even Ranga's course is somewhat similar to that, right? Because you've taken, at least until now, given that it used to be kind of similar to the PCA, it might be in that direction. I think something like that would be a second step. But the first step would be to keep it high level, and these might be my three recommendations. Now, of course, you should also not expect somebody to package it neatly for you in a single book or a single course. There are clearly multiple places that you need to go and look at all of this. And of course, read the Google blogs, right? They constantly keep giving information about um, new things that are happening on the cloud. And the last thing I would add to that is there are frameworks for transformation, for digital transformation that are published by Google, right? So Google says, there is I forget the names, but there are architecture frameworks. I think there are some frameworks for migration and transformation and all of that.
Right.
Those also would be good guidance. And the expectation that a learner should set is not to get all this information from this single place, but to have it being seen repeated in all these different courses, right? The courses, the material, the books, and all of that. And maybe that's starting point. But honestly, I don't know if it's a convincing answer. I'm not too convinced myself because, like I said, I have a problem detaching all the existing knowledge I have about cloud, about Google Cloud, and saying, here is where you should absolutely start. But I think I have a fair idea that the things that I suggested would be good starting points.
Absolutely. I agree. I mean, I think all the things which Satish is saying are like great starting points. I think just to add on, I think there are white papers published by Google Cloud on migration, transformation. I think those two white papers are really, really good. Probably we can add a link to those white papers as well in the description of this video. And one more course I would recommend is on Coursera. You have a Cloud Digital Leader course, which is
Oh,
updated. So you can,
okay.
yeah, on Coursera there is one which is updated, and obviously there is my course, right? So you can do
Okay.
that and you can clear it. But obviously, I mean, I'm just kidding. So it's yeah, I think as far as the course materials go, I think it would be for example, I'm planning to update my course in like
Yeah.
next few days. But I mean, it would be just based on exactly what I think is the certification objective, right? Now I look at the objectives, I decide, okay, probably this is the direction which it's going, and probably keep it still hands on. Like I have a feeling like a lot of people who attempt this certification, even though it is only meant for leaders or business leaders, uh, a lot of people who do this still would be developers or guys
Yeah.
who have a little bit of technical background.
Yeah.
So I actually intend to keep the course hands on and still add the little bit of business transformation on top of it. So yeah, that's how I see it going. And I think, yeah, this is like little, probably like Satish said, probably I think this discussion is too early because we don't know exactly what's changing right now. So probably we are like we don't have a proper answer at this point.
One thing, let me just add based on what he said. The white papers are actually good, right? There are a bunch of white papers that are published by Google, and these are not big books, right? These are usually a few pages,
Mm,
maximum 10 pages, 20 pages, and they're a quick read through, almost like a long blog post. And they are
absolutely.
good to get an idea of what is the guidance on some of these things. And usually, some of those white papers, at least from Google Cloud, don't get into the technical details too much. On top of that, I should plug something else that I do. There is a GitHub repository called Awesome GCP Certifications that I maintain, and
Absolutely.
if within that there is a folder called white papers, right? So I've been, whenever I see some white papers published by Google, I try to copy it and put it there, because the irritating thing about the Google Cloud white papers thing, though they're brilliant, is that every time you need to go put in your user details and like what's your name, what is your email, where are you from,
Exactly.
and agree to this. And sometimes I just want a quick reference, right? I know the thing exists. I've downloaded somewhere, but I don't have it anywhere. I search the web. and I want to find it, and I have to still go and put in all this information, which I found annoying. So I'm collecting all these white papers in this GitHub repository, and is of course free, open, and everything. And that's another place where you can just find it readily.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I love the awesome JCP repo. Like the information out there, I think is awesome, irrespective of which certification you are aiming for, right? Google Cloud Digital
Yeah.
Leader is just the starting one, but irrespective of the certification, I think that's a great place to go whenever you want to look at resources, what you need to take into consideration before you get into an exam.
100%. Yeah, that's my go-to place as well before any certification. So yeah, I think on the similar lines, similar to white papers, another thing which I found helpful is kind of the use case videos. So from time to time, some expert from Google will have client kind of have come in and talk about their digital transformation or their migration to Google Cloud journey. So I think I just watched from yesterday from one from Uber, how Uber is kind of using Cloud Spanner uh, for kind of supporting their requests, multiple concurrent requests. So I think those videos are also very helpful and informative. So yeah, do check them out.
In fact, that's what even I do. When I go to the, when I'm going to work out, and if I'm waiting for somebody, I usually play those videos, right? So there's a Google Cloud Tech video channel, and the
Yes.
one that you're mentioning is the recent one where Priyanka is talking to one of the engineering leaders at Uber, and that's a whole series, architecting with Google Cloud. Like that, there are also a bunch of other things. Like I think there's something called Data Journey with Google Cloud. So there are a whole bunch of technical ones. There are also ones that are at a fairly high level from a business perspective, where they interview clients, and that is also a good view into how these digital transformation journeys are getting done. And it can be something that you do while, I mean, you can just listen in while you are, walking on a treadmill or cycling on a stationary cycle. So yeah, good point, Amit. People should do that too.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So one final short. I've prepared. I've followed all the advices, and I've booked my exam. Please give me some tips and tricks for the exam so I can ace and clear the exam. Um, what would be that final icing on the cake?
Um, I think that before you wrap up, let's do talk about the, what happened with us, or at least me, trying to register for
Huh?
the exam and not being
Yep.
able to do it. But we'll keep that for the
That's
next question.
interesting.
The things about acing the exam are a few that I've discussed quite a few times. Let me just try to recall some of them. One of the key things I tell people is make sure you get a good night's sleep, right? Don't study
Yes.
until the last moment, because the questions in the exam are sometimes, I don't know for the CDL as yet, but for many of the other exams, they're quite convoluted, right? They're quite intricate. And you might assume something if you're not reading it clearly, right? So get a good night's sleep. And during the exam, focus, make sure you read the question, make sure you read it twice. And ensure that you've understood what exactly is being asked, because there's something somewhere that is changing what is the requirement, right? There is probably one word, one phrase, and if you miss that, you've missed a question, right, in the context of everything else. So one of the key things is focus. Especially if you're taking some of the beta exams that go for 4 hours, you're absolutely going to be dead by the end of it, right? You just don't have focus. Even at the end of 2 hours, I tend to lose focus, right? Towards the last about half an hour, I'm thinking about random stuff. What am I going to have for lunch and other things, right? The mind just drifts. So make sure that you are physically and mentally um, focused on on the exams question, understanding all of that. One other key thing, there's a whole bunch of, hey, here is the right way to do the exam, but one of the other things I always say is, again, don't leave any question unanswered, right? Because there's no negative marking. So answer something, and there's at least follow a process of elimination to make sure that you've reduced the chances of error, right? Hopefully I'll do a couple of videos on this on my awesome GCP channel. I'm planning to do that. So the tips for the exam, how to actually do the exam and everything. So maybe look out for that also on the awesome GCP channel.
Cool. Absolutely, I agree with Satish's answer. Right. So, a lot of times in today's world, finding focus is the most difficult thing, and even during the exam, because that's the only 2 hours where you want to focus just on the exam, it becomes really, really difficult. So I think focusing on the question, reading it properly, I mean, forgetting everything you have learned and reading the question properly and understanding the intent of the question. I think that's the thing which is the most challenging thing to do today. So that's what I would recommend everybody to focus on, right? So read the question, every word of it, uh, and understand the intent why somebody is asking that question, and then figure out the right answer. And like CDL is probably a question where I mean, CDL is more a certification where you will not be challenged for time. So you can take significant time. So don't just go with the first obvious thing. Just spend time reading the question. I think that would be like, I think that would be a great thing to follow.
I think this might be a good time to add some additional concerns actually I have about the CDL exam, right? One of the things that I predicted would be the case for the new set of Cloud Digital Leader questions would be that once you create an abstract question, once you raise it, like you said, it's at a fairly high level. And once you get to a higher level, the problem is your questions or your answers are no more objective, right? So, for example, if I asked you, how do I get from Bangalore to Bombay? You will say, I mean, invariably the answer is going to be, it depends, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how much time do you have? How much money do you have? How quickly do you want to get there? Whereas when you ask a question like in the other exams, right, where you say, I want to get from Bombay to Bangalore within a certain amount of time by spending so much money, now your answer is very objective, right? It's a very clear answer. It's really clear cut what you can do. But I kind of predicted that once you move out from that, right, you don't have objectiveness anymore. And invariably, you could be confused by what the options are because you
Exactly.
bring in your own understanding and your own background and past, your own biases into that question. So if you see, I answered the 20 questions in the new set of sample questions, and I got 2 of them wrong. Silly questions, but you could completely interpret some of their answers any way you want, right? I don't know if you guys
Exactly.
tried the
No,
exam. I don't know
I got one wrong.
you got one wrong. I got 2 wrong. And even now I'm looking at that exam, I mean, that question thing when I reviewed, I'm like, yeah, but I can't, I mean, there's no way you're going to convince me that this is the right answer, right? And
No,
that
we
could be
don't
a
agree.
problem. That could
Yeah.
be a problem where once you abstract the question, move it to a higher level, you've got so many different options, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it might actually get a little more difficult, right? I don't know if it's going to be easier for somebody who knows the subject well, right? It might be difficult in a different form. That lack of
Right.
objectivity and clearly defining, yeah, this is exactly it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just a
Luck basically will play a big part there on those kind of questions.
and you don't
Probably.
want luck to be the decider there,
Yes.
right? You want your own knowledge to be, and that's where I feel it might get a little tough, right? So
And
again,
Satish,
going back to it,
also another,
posing the question.
sorry, I mean, going back, right? So probably we are basing the judgment just on the 20 questions that we saw. Probably
Yeah,
the
yeah,
actual
very much
questions
so.
in the exam are
Yeah,
much better than what the practice questions are. And
very
hopefully
much
that,
possible.
yeah, it's like, because I agree. I mean, the practice test questions, some of them, I mean, are like very ambiguous, to say
Very
the least.
ambiguous. Yeah. Even
So
after they
yeah,
told me the answer, I still could contend with this and say, what? Obviously not. That cannot be the right answer for these reasons. In fact, on my Awesome GCP channel, there's one question that is always a controversy, right? Because again, they've made it extremely ambiguous. Luckily, it's not part of the actual exam. It was just part of one of the sample questions in one of the exams. And that is the video where everybody's like, no, I don't agree with this. Here are my reasons. Somebody else says, yeah, but I don't agree with that. Here's my reasons.
yeah,
And that's a problem once you move up, at a higher level.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Sure, sure. And another kind of from my side, one input I would like to give to the folks who want to sit for this exam is have loads of patience, guys. Because now with COVID, everybody is taking the exams from home. And before the exam starts, you have to do a lot of circus, turn your camera like 360 degrees, and it takes
Right.
sometimes like 60 minutes or so before you can actually start the exam. And it tests your patience, really tests your patience. So don't let that initial setup activity kind of affect your mood and your exam scenario. So yeah, I think it will be a test of your patience as well if you kind of end up in that kind of situation. Not everybody does, but yeah, I've heard some stories.
I think that's an important point. In fact, that happened to me. I just mentioned, right? I took a LibML certification this Monday, and before I could actually connect to the exam, it took me about 3 attempts. There are sometimes network issues and all of that, and it is important to know that this is not exclusive to you as an individual test taker, right? It happens to quite a few people. So don't be flustered by it, because once you're flustered, you're in panic mode, you're stressed out, you're not focusing, and it is going to reduce your ability to do the exam well, right? Even during the exam, sometimes the network goes off, but it doesn't matter, right? They're going to connect you back, they're going to give you back your time. So knowing that we've all had those experiences might be some way to calm you down when you face it, when you are taking the exam, right? So what Amit said is, again, very important.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Sure. And finally, I'm super excited with this new course of Cloud Digital Leader. I already have a valid certification. Can I take this test again? I just want to test the waters.
Yeah, you're rubbing a sore point there, but it's very important that we discuss it. So I actually registered for the exam this morning. Okay, so it was on Jan 26th, which was day before yesterday, that the new exam got released. And I looked for a slot, and I registered for something this morning because, as I said, I'm also helping Google's partners learn Google Cloud and certify even for the CDL and ACE and PCA and whatever whatnot. So it was important for me also to get an understanding of what the new exam is like, so that I can tell people, what, hey, this is what you need to study for. This is the kind of stuff that you need to, what topics would you need to generally look at, right? Those kind of things. Not to give them the exam questions, but to give them and to guide them about the exam itself. So what happened was, last night, right, about 5 6 hours before I was supposed to take the exam, I got a mail from Google saying that, hey, you can't take this exam, we've cancelled it for you, right? So there is a rule that when you take an exam, and if it's valid, you can't take it again repeatedly, right? It's only, I think, 60 days before it expires you're allowed to take it again. On the WebSSS site where you log in for this exam, right, where you register for the exam, usually for all the other exams, it says you can't do it. So if you go there and try to register for the, say, the data engineer exam, which you have a valid certification for, it doesn't even allow you to buy it. That button is not there, right? And it says, hey, you know what, you passed this exam previously, you can't take it for a long period of time. But on the Cloud Digital Leader, it allows you to buy the exam. Right? So that threw me off, right? It was allowed me to buy the exam when the others didn't. So the user experience was, oh, if it allows me to buy it, I should be allowed to do it, right? And
Yeah.
I thought it allows me to do it also because the exam has changed, probably significantly. So I bought the exam, I paid for it, they cancelled it this morning, and so I've not been able to take the exam, and I won't be able to take it at least for another year and a half. I don't know if the money is going to be refunded, but there was a strong mail from Google saying that, hey, if you're going to be attempting this exam, we will cancel your. Not only have they cancelled this exam, but if you try to cheat the rules, if you try to go against the rules, we will bar you from all exams, right? We will remove all your remaining certifications. And it was just a rule setting there. But the mail was fairly strong in those words, saying that, we don't want anybody damaging the integrity of our exams, which is understandable, right? You can't be taking these exams repeatedly. So to summarize, I booked the exam. It allowed me to book it, but then the system allowed me to book it, but they canceled the exam, citing this rule. So if you currently have a valid certification for the Cloud Digital Leader, even though it's a completely different exam, don't go buy it. Don't go register for it, right? It's not going to be worth it. So
Yeah.
yeah, over to you, Ranga.
No, I agree. I mean, that's how it works. Like the first time, like for the other certification, it's not. I mean, for other clouds, you can retake the certification. They don't have any restrictions as to how many times you can take the certification. At least as far as my knowledge goes. But like I think Google Cloud is very very particular about not retaking the certification again and again.
Yeah.
You have to wait until the entire thing. And I agree. I mean, if the exam has changed significantly, and let's say you have a course on it, you want to understand how that, I mean, how the certification like has changed.
Yeah.
Right now we don't have an option. We just have the practice test and we have the exam objectives, and that's all we have.
Now, let me just say another thing that I think is the case, right? Let us say you have, say, the professional data engineer, and they come up with a new beta exam. I think you're allowed to take the beta exam without affecting the existing one, right? But
Okay.
once it goes generally available, then you can't,
Okay.
right? So this is my understanding. I'm not very sure. I haven't tried it. But the thing
Okay.
with the cloud digital leader was there was no beta phase,
There was no beta.
right? It went from GA old version, the generally available old version, to the generally available new version, right? There was no beta period where we could have done this.
Exactly.
There was a beta period, but it was only on a selected basis. So Google had to
Okay.
say, you know what, you go take the exam, and they gave it only for internal Google employees. It was not generally available, right? So I
Okay.
think this exam has been slightly different, and it threw me off. But just understand that at the thing, right? If you already have a valid CDL, you don't, they won't allow you to take the new one. I think they should though, right? Because the exam
Yeah.
is so different. I think they should, at least for us as educators, trainers, right? I'm a Google authorized trainer. How am I going to train somebody on the CDL without having a fairly good knowledge of how this is worked, right? So I think
Absolutely.
hopefully the policy will be relaxed, but right now it isn't the case.
Cool.
Okay, so yeah, so basically the outcome is if you have a valid certification for CDL, don't try. Otherwise, you might face some strict circumstances, right, from Google. Yeah. No, thank you very much for that. I think this video have been really awesome. So anybody who wants to learn this Cloud Digital Leader certification, I think uh, this video has all the relevant content in it. Thank you so much, Satish and Ranga, for sharing your valuable inputs on this.
Thanks, Amit.
Thank you, Amit and Raga. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, nice talking to you all and meeting you all again.
Thank you.
Bye bye for now.